that will allow those kind of leaks to continue.
I commend you for that. I think ultimately legislation will be needed because the next administration could reverse it. I think there is bipartisan support for some controls on gain of function. As you shut down gain of function, though, you have to decide what it is, and then you have to look for it. So I would suggest that at both Fort Detrick and at the NBAC lab that's nearby, run by the DHS, that we look at experiments involving Ebola, avian flu, Marburg virus, to determine, one, whether they gain of function, but also just determine whether the experiments are wise. I am told in public records that they are doing experiments or have done experiments to aerosolize Ebola at the NBAC lab. That's the DHS lab nearby to Fort Detrick. My hope is that when you investigate whether to do gain of function or what is gain of function, what is being done, that you'll compile that and at least give us a report in Congress, and we're going to ask for it. But so there can be public scrutiny of these things. You will help to scrutinize it, but the whole public needs to know how dangerous some of these things are and whether we should be doing them. The idea of aerosolizing Ebola, I think, is or training Ebola to be aerosolized is incredibly dangerous, probably goes against the Biological Weapons Convention. And I'd like to hear a little bit about whether or not, as you investigate this, you plan on bringing information back to Congress or to the public.
Yeah, we're going to be absolutely transparent. I have a trip planned to Fort Detrick with Christy Nome, the director of DHS, and with Jay Bhattacharya and other people in my agency who are experts on bioweapons, who are experts on gain-of-function research, and we are going to be absolutely transparent. We've also proposed a methodology for regulating and for determining what is dangerous gain of function and what is legitimate scientific investigation, and how to bring the public into that debate, which I think, as you point out, is absolutely critical. That is where we messed up last time. And as you know, we have some of the Democrats here who are, talking about the great science from NIH, but now we have the major agencies, intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, the DOE, and the State Department have all agreed that NIH research almost certainly led to the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So that's not the kind of the result that we should be allowing or enabling, and we're going to end that now.
If possible, the trip to Fort Detrick and to NBAC, we'd like to be included or invited on that trip if possible.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, one of my constituents, her name's Natalie Phelps. She's a mom of two from Bainbridge Island in Washington State. She has been fighting aggressive stage 4 colorectal cancer for nearly 5 years now. Her best hope now is a clinical trial she's participating in at the NIH Clinical Center. She flew out to NIH a few weeks ago for her first appointment, and her care team there wanted her to come back in 4 weeks to start treatment. But because of the thoughtless mass firing of thousands of critical employees across NIH and HHS that you carried out, Natalie's doctors at that clinical center have told her they have no choice but to delay her treatment by an additional 4 weeks. Now, an extra 4 weeks may not sound like a long time, but I will tell you, for stage 4 cancer patients like Natalie, this could mean the difference between life and death. Secretary Kennedy, how many staff have been cut from the NIH's clinical center? I want a specific number.
Yeah, I can't tell you that now, Senator Murray. What I can tell you is that if you contact my office tomorrow, I'll look specifically into that.
Well, that is not acceptable. I want an answer back by that. She deserves it. I do it. She doesn't have much time. She deserves an answer back.
And wouldn't you rather get her into that clinical trial as fast as you can?
Absolutely.
All right, so if you contact my office tomorrow, this is if that happened.
You are here to defend your budget. I'm here to ask you questions about the impact of that.
Well, you asked me about a specific case that I want to help with. I don't think anybody,
but there are.
I don't think that should happen to anybody.
Okay, well, what have you, and I mean you personally, done to assess how those staff cuts are impacting patient care? She is one of many. What have you done to assess that?
I provided the guidelines that said that no clinical trials should be affected by the cuts. I have, only.
Mr. Secretary, I just have a short amount of time. They are impacting clinical trials.
You asked me a question. Do you want me to answer it?
I want to tell you, you need to know this. You're here to defend the NIH budget, which.
Yeah, Senator, do you want me to answer your question?
Well, I want
You want me to answer your question,
to
Senator?
tell you that Natalie is sitting there waiting for treatment.
I'm offering to help her, but you don't care.
Mr.
You don't care about Natalie.
reclaim my
I've offered to help Natalie.
I am asking you a question, and it is critical. You are here to defend cutting NIH by half. Do you genuinely believe that that won't result in more stories like Natalie's?
I think the cuts that are now proposed by NIH are going to hurt. I think that President Trump, listen, there's no agency head in the government like myself that wants to see their budget cut. And
Well, and I asked you, have you personally assessed what this is doing to patients? And I am telling you, one story of one person, it is impacting life or death situation. I think it's.
Do you want me to answer your question, Senator?
Well, you did.
Oh, I have not. You have not allowed me to answer it.
Well, I will just say that it is my job to be a voice for people like Natalie and countless other patients who are like her. So you've got to fix this. I want to know, and I want a personal update on Natalie's case, and you offered that. Please give that to me in the next 24 hours, and I expect details and transparency about the state of NIH clinical care.
You contact my office, Senator, and I
think you
will
could
do
contact
everything
my
in my
office as well.
power to try to get Natalie into that.
I got 1 minute left, and I want to ask you about the NIOSH cuts. I am really alarmed by your decision to essentially eliminate the National Institutes for Occupational Safety and Health. You've already fired nearly 90% of the staff. That includes the staff in my state at the Spokane Research Lab. Those are experts. They do essential work to protect miners and firefighters and farm workers, people who work in dangerous conditions. I am told that after a backlash, you are reinstating some of those, mainly in the West Virginia office, but nobody in the Western United States. And there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to how you've made these decisions. And how do you explain this to my constituents in Spokane who are out of a job and the workers that are being impacted by that?
The work in NIOSH will not be interrupted. I've brought back 328 workers, mainly in the Cleveland office and the Morgantown office and for the World Trade Center site. And that work will continue. The work on mine safety will continue. The epicenter of that work has been Cleveland and it's been Morgantown. We understand it's a critically important function, and I did not want to see it end.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say you can't fire 90% of the people and assume the work gets done.
Senator Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, nearly 7 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease, and caring for people with this devastating chronic disease costs us some $360 billion a year. I am the author of a law that's known as the BOLD Act. It takes a public health approach to Alzheimer's. It educates providers, promotes earlier diagnosis, it helps caregivers, and it also promotes lifestyle changes. I have worked very hard to make sure that HHS has the resources to carry out this law, which was just recently extended. I'm concerned that the reductions in force of approximately 10,000 staff across HHS will completely undermine this act. And this act, in many ways, is very consistent with your approach of looking at public health issues for chronic diseases. For example, the Healthy Aging Branch administers the BOLD Act for Alzheimer's. It has lost all of its staff. So how can you ensure that the CDC continues to implement the BOLD Act and the Alzheimer's programs under it, when all of the staff responsible for that administration have either been placed on administrative leave or let go?
I don't know enough about that program, but I know that under that division has been folded into the Agency for Healthy America. And a lot of the reports that whole divisions have been liquidated were just wrong. They were divisions that were being reassigned under the reorg. Now, I'm under a constraint here because at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, we were told that a federal judge granted a TRO in our case on the reorg. And my attorneys have asked me not to talk about any details of the reorg today. But on that budget line, I will work with you. I'm committed. Alzheimer's is run in my family. As you know my cousin Maria Shriver, who's deeply involved in it. The NIH had a very, very checkered history on studying Alzheimer's because of the amyloid plaque scandal. And we have an opportunity now to do really good science and find a cure very quickly, and also find out, equally importantly, why so many people are getting Alzheimer's in this generation. I want to make that happen. I want to work with you, Senator, to make sure that that happens and that those programs continue.
Thank you. I chaired recently the first Appropriations Committee hearing of the year, and we focused on biomedical research and how important it is that America not lose its global edge in innovation that's producing life-saving and life-enhancing discoveries. As among the many issues that we covered, as you might expect, the hearing explored the 15% arbitrary one-size-fits-all percent cap that NIH has imposed on indirect but still research-related costs for its grants. What we heard is that this cap will mean less basic research, fewer clinical trials, and that it will also cause our scientists and researchers to leave the United States and go to other countries. I believe strongly that this proposed cap is poorly thought out, that it's harmful, and I know that it violates current law because since 2018, we've included in the appropriations bill specific language that prevents NIH from imposing such a cap. So I know the system needs to be looked at, but are you reviewing how NIH's approach of this one-size-fits-all 15% cap on indirect costs would affect laboratories, whether they're private, nonprofit labs, or whether they're in universities, as far as doing crucial biomedical research?
Yeah, Senator, we are, and you and I have talked about this issue. And I think the impetus for the cap was that there were a lot of private universities with giant endowments like Stanford and Harvard that were getting indirect payments of 78%. What that means, if you get $1 million grant, NIH then has to pay you an extra $780,000 for administrative costs, and a lot of those costs weren't even going to anything to do with science. They were going to, the university budget. And in order to curb that abuse, we adopted a 15%, which is the industry standard. That's what the Gates Foundation or any other foundation would pay. But I understand the University of Maine, University of Alabama, many other universities, state universities, were not abusing it. We lost about $9 billion a year in those kind of costs. And so we have a plan for how to address issues like what's happening at the University of Maine. I'm being gavelled out, so I will talk to you privately about that.
Thank you.
Senator Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Kennedy, you run a department that touches the lives of almost every American. Yet for this budget hearing, these are the 6 pages that we have gotten in terms of your budget request. We are also 7.5 months into this fiscal year, and yet you are not telling the American public anything about how you are spending the billions in taxpayer dollars right now. You had to submit an operating plan to the Congress, and this is just a sample page, but 530 programs simply have asterisks. Secretary Kennedy, this isn't about your hiding information from me. This is about your hiding information from the American public. And if you're going to cut cancer research or gut mental health support, at least stand by your work and explain it to the American people. Now, Secretary Kennedy, I want to start with what I hope is an easy question for you. Do you think lead poisoning in children is a significant concern?
Is lead poisoning?
In children, a significant concern?
It's a extremely significant concern.
Thank you. Then I would like to know why your department has effectively shut down the very program to address lead poisoning in children. The city of Milwaukee requested assistance from the CDC to help the city respond to lead poisoning cases tied to public schools. 6 schools have been closed, displacing more than 1,800 school children. The request for federal assistance was denied because of lack of staff. The entire childhood lead poisoning branch has been fired. In the words of a Milwaukee mom, it really sends a message of, you don't matter. I don't know what you would say to parents who must now test their children for lead and deal with school closures. But do you intend to eliminate this branch at CDC, yes or no?
No, we do not.
Okay. Because you cannot tell us that you want to make America healthy again when you are willfully destroying programs that keep children safe and healthy from lead poisoning. Congress dedicated $51 million in funding for this particular program. But when a community asks for help to prevent lifelong complications for children, and there is no one there to pick up the phone, and it's not because this program is ineffective, it's because you fired the entire team whose job it is to support communities like Milwaukee.
If that money has been appropriated, we will spend that money. If it's been appropriated to Milwaukee, we will spend it in Milwaukee. I've spent a lot of time in Milwaukee
It's to
working on
provide
that.
expert, and the entire staff has been fired. Secretary Kennedy, I did note in your opening testimony, although we wouldn't know it from the skinny budget that we have, that you plan on funding the Head Start program. But I want to tell you about the ramifications of what has happened to date with regard to Head Start. I've heard from families across the state, people who are terrified about the uncertainty and instability surrounding Head Start. Just 1 week into President Trump's administration, Head Start programs in Wisconsin suddenly couldn't access their grant funding. It forced one Head Start in Waukesha, Wisconsin to temporarily close, leaving 250 families without care. Over the last 4 months, HHS has provided roughly $1 billion less to Head Start programs across the country than during the same period last year. The delays in funding have exacerbated uncertainty for programs needing to make payroll. And in some instances, like the one I cited in Waukesha, programs have had to shut their doors until the payments came through. Now, I don't know what you would say to a parent who is unable to drop their child off at preschool because you failed to get already appropriated money out the door? Or maybe I should ask you, what would you say to a parent who shows up for child care or for Head Start and the doors are closed?
I would be very sad if somebody shut up. I fought very, very hard to make sure that there'd be
What
no
is
cuts.
causing the delays in
As I
Head Start
said,
funding?
That's my question. I fought very hard to make sure that Head Start gets all of its funding next year.
Well, we need it this year, and why are there delays now?
I don't know that there are, Senator, and I will look into it, but I don't know. There should not be any delays. The funding is there. We are spending it. It's allocated. I don't know why there would be those kind of problems. I can tell you that within the agency, there were, there were people who wanted to make the Trump administration look bad, and that there were checks held up that shouldn't have been. I will have to look into that, Senator.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. Good to see you. I want to talk a little bit about the HHS reorganization on some of the programs that impact Alaska's most vulnerable populations. I sent you a note letting you know that just after this hearing, I'm going to be chairing a Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, specifically examining HHS tribal programs that are outside of IHS. I really thank you for your early efforts to exempt IHS healthcare providers from the RIFs. That was very important. But I've also heard concerns from tribal leaders on the impacts of RIFs to key HHS programs serving their communities. So I know you're going to have some of your folks tuning in on that, and I really appreciate that. But some of the other reductions that we're looking at within your budget do have significant consequences to a state like mine. One is the LIHEAP program, the Low-Income Energy Assistance. For us, it's not a budget line item. You've been to Alaska. You know that the temperatures there can get really, really tough. Keeps people from freezing to death in their homes. Another program is NIOSH. And I know that HHS had rescinded a number of those employees. That was great news. But the employees that received RIF notices for the program were not rescinded in the NIOSH Center for Marine Safety and Health Studies. So this is a big deal for our commercial fishing safety. It could effectively leave our fishing fleet out of compliance with Coast Guard safety regs. So we're watching that very, very carefully. And then again, shared focus here on making sure that our children are as healthy as they possibly can be. So I want to look to ways that we can strengthen and not eliminate the Head Start program. But I wanted to ask you...
You're talking about the NIOSH program.
NIOSH, yeah.
You should talk to me about that.
Okay.
And, as you know, that's something that I'm deeply
You're very
concerned with
familiar with.
the commercial fishery. So we should talk about it. And let's, and let's work for a solution.
Got it. I am with you right there. Let me ask about domestic violence and sexual assault funding. Right now, I'm receiving a lot of incoming from our community-based domestic and sexual violence program operators. They're really concerned about the delayed release of FY25 funding, the absence of notices of funding opportunities, as well as proposed cuts or consolidations that might threaten the Office of Family Violence Prevention,